I don't know how to finish the sentence properly.
It's been a while since we've...
How about this? Welcome to Saturday School, everybody. We are back. There's some proper English for you.
Hell yeah. Back in full effect. Real quick, what's Saturday School, Mark Bell?
Saturday School is where you get to pretty much just chit-chat with me. You don't have to listen to Nsima talking about how jacked he is.
He's so
handsome. Yeah, that too. He's all
so
jujitsu-y and everything, and bendy and flexible and strong. Like, who cares about any of that anyway?
Oh, man. Me.
Yeah, Saturday School, we're going to, everybody, right? who wants that? Everybody. Could sell Nsima's jeans, then we would be making billions and billions of dollars. Because who wouldn't want to look like that? Yeah, Saturday School is where we just get some education straight from me. Gives me an opportunity just to blab on. And sorry that we've been absent for so long, but we're fat and lazy and selfish.
It's okay. People love days off of school anyways. I was just thinking, like, you know, when they roll in the big ass TV with literally the big ass, then you knew it's like, oh, I'm going to have such a good nap right now. But
the tracking's always off every time.
I don't know, you probably missed this, but I remember like a really big disc. It wasn't a DVD. It was like the size of a record.
Oh yeah. That's what, like laser disc,
Laser
right?
disc. Yes. Where did that go? It never made it. I only seen it in school.
Well, and it was pretty high quality from what I remember.
Yeah. It probably cost like $1 million per disc.
DVDs came and went pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't last that long.
No.
And they always got like scratched and messed up.
Too brittle.
And it would happen with your video games. And you're like, they got to bring back the old school cartridges. And that's when we lost everything, Andrew. And now here we are. And there's young kids going around doing crazy shit.
Now you don't even need anything. You just download it. But okay, real quick, what I wanted to get to today, because I've actually been getting asked quite a bit around, around jiu-jitsu and just like everywhere out and about, kind of talking about like diet questions and stuff. And it's mind-boggling how, I guess maybe because of where we're at.
Mind-boggling or boggling?
Bottling.
Oh,
yeah, that's
your
from
mind's bottled up.
It's Will Ferrell. Oh, I forgot what movie, but somebody corrects him. Like, don't you mean mind-boggling? He's like, no, it's mind-boggling. So I've always said it that way.
What is that movie's In-Laws or whatever? Or Step
Brothers?
Step Brothers.
Yeah.
It's probably in that.
Maybe.
That has a lot of stupid stuff in it. That's funny.
Dude, I love that movie. Boats and Hoes. What I'm finding out is that people just don't really know how to eat. That sounds mean. And if you're listening to this podcast already, or if you guys are already subscribed to the YouTube channel, first off, thank you. But you guys are already in it. So you might know somebody that's not in it, that when you have a conversation and they're just like not even sure what the hell a carb is or whatever. So I know this is very, very general, but we'll start here and then we'll keep diving deeper and deeper. But how should people eat?
I think a lot of the people that we're around a lot of folks that I know you're doing jiu-jitsu now. I'm running, and there's a lot of people that want to know how to eat, but also still have good performance every day. We also have family members and stuff that really don't do shit, and they're trying to figure out how to eat too. But in general, I think let's maybe focus a little bit more on the guy that wants to go to the gym, or guy that's like being at least halfway consistent with the gym, a guy who's doing jiu-jitsu or running or doing some extracurricular activity other than just maybe lifting. So I think that the way people should eat, and this kind of goes for everybody, but I think the more natty that you eat, the better off you are, which is kind of funny because after many years of taking performance enhancing drugs and shooting myself with like God knows what from God knows who, from whatever bottle that's not even labeled, it's kind of funny that I care so much about what I put into my body, right?
So I had this conversation.
I don't want artificial sweeteners in there.
Me and Tony Hughes were going back and forth, taking anything, right? And then he's just like, yeah, but make sure your deodorant doesn't have aluminum.
Yeah,
like,
right.
All right, got it, doc.
Yeah. You don't want that to lower your testosterone levels. You're like, I'm blasting testosterone already. What's the fucking difference?
I think I'll be okay.
So I think, a whole foods diet. And there's a lot of options when it comes to this. There's actually something called Whole30. And maybe, Andrew, maybe you can pull up some pictures or something that might have a diagram of some of the foods that are on Whole30. There's also something called the vertical diet, which our boy Bones Jones uses, along with a lot of other people. The vertical diet was created by our boy Stan Efferding. There's a lot of great information in there. But again, he's sticking to natural foods. Stan went a few steps further by finding foods that are on this thing, what's called a FODMAP. And the FODMAP basically is just trying to find foods that aren't super disruptive of our digestive system. Yeah, there's Whole30. Whole30 has been utilized by a lot of gyms and a lot of CrossFit gyms in particular. And they'll say, hey, let's try this whole foods diet for 30 days. Things like that, I think, are they're amazing. It's unbelievable to try. I mean, even with a whole foods diet, you end up with something that's also referred to as an elimination diet for a lot of people. Let's just eliminate. Let's not really worry about calories. Let's not even talk too much about carbs, protein, or fats. We can kind of avoid that conversation. But let's just talk about eating whole foods. And then also, what about eating complete meals? What about each meal that you have for the day has some representation of protein, some representation of carbohydrates, some representation of some fats? I think those are things that are kind of pretty easy to be on board with. There's also two other diets that come to mind that have a nice wide variety of foods. And probably one of the most studied diets is called the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is great. And Andrew, maybe you can bring up another thing of that so we can kind of see what some of the foods are on there. But the Mediterranean diet talks a lot about, having things like olives and olive oil and vegetables and berries. And, don't forget that some of these things that we're not sure what they are, they're actually fruits. Things like avocados are actually a form of fruit. Olives are actually a form of fruit. But they're very, very low sugar fruits. In fact, they really don't. I don't think an olive has like any sugar in it at all, maybe. But then you have like dark berries and stuff. You got blueberries. You have raspberries, blackberries. These are all really strawberries. These are all really, really delicious, really tasty, but they're also low sugar. I would say that you can kind of eat I would say that food's free. I would say that actually almost all of these foods are free. I would just watch out for the amount of fat calories that you consume if you don't want to pack on body weight. And where I would be cautious is with things like bacon, things like butter, cooking stuff in a lot of oils. I'm not against any of that. Actually, I'm for that. I actually think it's great. And it can be those types of foods can be, and avocados and all these different things can be really productive in a diet. It's just so you want to pay attention to that because it's really calorically dense. And the second that we start to add fats and carbs and protein, we start to mix them all together in something like a teriyaki bowl is probably the greatest example of that. Teriyaki bowl is a lot of times it's chicken thigh, and then you got rice, and then you have teriyaki sauce on there. So now we got a crazy amount of carbohydrates. We have a crazy amount of salt. We have a crazy amount of sugar. We have a crazy amount of flavor, and you're kind of eating something where you're like, I think this is pretty good for me. It's chicken and rice, right? But it is chicken that has a little bit more fat calories. So these are all things that you want to be aware of. And if you're getting food from anywhere other than your own kitchen, you don't know how it's prepared. So it might be cooked in some sort of oil or grease, and it might have extra fat calories in there. I'm not a crazy person about calories. I don't really care about them that much, but it is important to try to pick the energy source that you want your body to run off of. And very, very easily, carbohydrates are a great source, fats are a great source, and protein is not a great source of energy for a human. It is a kind of more of a building block. It's something that could be more stable, more neutral for most people. If someone weighs 200 pounds, they could just eat 200 pounds of protein per day, or
200 grams.
200 grams of protein, 200 pounds of protein, 200 grams of protein per day to help keep that muscle mass and maybe even add muscle mass because maybe they're in the gym. And then we can have conversation on, what do we do with the fats and carbs?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will talk about being confused about, calories in, calories out. How many calories should I be consuming? Should I drop the carb? Should I go, low carb? Should I go high fat? Whatever it may be, a keto diet. If somebody is following, let's say, a Whole30 diet or the Mediterranean diet, do they even have to worry about like tracking how many calories and how many carbs and grams of fat and protein and all that they're actually consuming?
I would say that there's nothing wrong with learning this practice. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to be helpful. Mm-hmm. The more educated you are, the better. The more that you can learn, the better. And what's a fast way to learn about your diet? It's probably, if you're starting to look into other diets, it's probably something that you haven't been proficient at, something that you maybe haven't been great at, or it's not optimal. You're looking to optimize it. So, what's just some old school advice? Yeah, let's write it down. Mm-hmm. Maybe have a journal, maybe have an app on your phone. Again, for me personally, I don't always love the measuring of stuff. I just think it's kind of tedious, and I think that it can be really hard to actually figure out how many calories you're consuming, since the nutrition labels can be something like around 15%. Mm-hmm. They have 15% wiggle room. And then to make matters even more confusing, something like a Pop-Tart isn't necessarily tested for how many calories it has in it, but the ingredients have been tested over time. And so then they put all that together and like, this is the math of this. Mm-hmm. So that's why I don't love calorie counting, but it doesn't mean that it can still be very effective. So counting calories and paying attention to what you eat and writing it down, I think that writing it down, I personally think that writing it down has a stronger feel to it, and is when you think about what you ate and you actually physically are writing it down on a piece of paper, I think there's a stronger connection there. And I'm not saying that that's something you need to do every day for the rest of your life, but it would be a good idea to start there. When it comes to calories, how many calories should you have and all these different things? Again, it's pretty difficult to nail down and to pin down exactly how many calories you did consume. It's also really hard to account for how many calories you're spending every day. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of estimations online. If you wanted to lose weight, I think you can multiply your body weight times like 12, and you end up in a decent neighborhood-ish of about how many calories you're going to have available to you. And then over time, you're going to have to kind of wiggle that around to figure out what's allowing you to lose weight. I personally have always liked just going after protein. So for myself, every meal I have, a meal really isn't a meal. A meal isn't a meal. It's more of a snack if it doesn't have about 30 grams of protein for me. That's kind of the way I view it. So I'll eat things like Carnivore crisps. It's just almost like a beef jerky type of thing. Only has 2 ingredients. One of them is beef. The other one is salt. And it's just kind of a dried out meat I think it's delicious. So I'll eat things like that. I'll have, like protein shakes and all kinds of different things. But mainly I try to eat 2 or 3 times a day. I'll have a full-on meal. I'll have a couple of eggs, or I'll have 8 ounces of steak, then maybe a handful of hours later, because a lot of times I get home at like 4 or 5 from work. I'll have a couple ounces of meat, and then maybe about 2 hours later, after I showered and stuff and start to get myself situated and arranged for the next day, I'll actually sit down with my family and eat again. I call it my second dinner. And that's always been really effective for me. And then if I still feel like I need to top everything off, that's where I might have some dark chocolate. I might make a fruit bowl with some protein and some yogurt. That's where I might kind of mess around with things a bit. But I think you can keep it I think you can keep things that simple. And if you're eating natural foods, it becomes very difficult to overeat. And again, just to reference what I said in the beginning, if you're eating natural foods, the only thing I think you really need to pay attention to is the fat content. Because if you're eating 80-20 ground beef with rice, and you do that a couple times a day, your calories are just launched through the roof.
Yeah, that the fattier stuff tends to always taste a little bit better.
Oh yeah, it tastes good.
But I forgot which guest recently mentioned it, but about how they figure out the macros for like even chicken breast. You know, because in bodybuilding, like that's like the staple, right? You eat chicken breast and broccoli and rice. But it was developed years ago, and they never went away from it. So like that bag of chicken that you're getting, you know, at Costco, they didn't actually like, oh, let me take a chunk out of this chicken and see what the calories are. Like they didn't do that. They just went off of a number that they got fucking decades ago.
Everything's like that too. Your supplements are that way. The amino acids that someone's trying to sell you on, and they're telling you.
But this is scientifically tested, Mark. Like I went and got this tested.
They tell you that. But they're not lying. When someone has essential amino acids or branch chain amino acids, and they're saying that this is scientifically proven to work or whatever, proof is a really nasty word. So no one can really ever prove anything, just so everyone's aware of that.
Yeah. What do they say? They say lab tested or something like that, right?
They
like
do.
That's the verbiage.
Yeah, they say some stuff like that, but they might say it's proven to help or whatever the words are. But the truth is that particular product, let's just say it's called Celtech, because this is an old company I don't think is around anymore, right? Let's say they're saying this is the best thing ever. This Celtech amino acid blend helps with muscle protein synthesis. And we know this because this is lab tested. Well, maybe the amino acid formula or formulation of some sort was tested at some point, or maybe the amino acids were tested individually at some point, but the actual amino acids that you're purchasing from that company, that Celtech company, I don't know if you need to bleep that out or I don't know, was never actually tested. And that's all the companies. I have my own supplements, my steak shake. We have beef protein isolate in there. We have desiccated organs in there, and desiccated organs. There has been some research on desiccated organs on what they can do, but my particular desiccated organs that are in the steak shake aren't tested. Why? Because no one does that. It's not a standard thing. But I'm also not going to lie about it. I hear people, they say that all the time, and I'm like, man, I don't like the words that they're using there. But anyway, back to your foods. Your foods are very similar. These things may have been tested a long time ago. And the way that they're tested is kind of chaotic. I personally don't think it makes any sense, but that's not the point of this podcast. It'd just be way too long if we sat here and tried to talk about that. And I'm quite frankly not qualified to talk about that at length. We would have to have Lane Norton and maybe somebody else here where we can kind of dig through Alan Aragon or something like that. And we could dig through the research and they would be informing me a lot, even though I understand a pretty good amount about nutrition. But the point is to know that there's a lot of variables when it comes to your calories in and calories out. I think it's important that people learn how to cook. I think it's important that there's so many reasons for this, but I think it's important that you learn how to cook so that you can at least somewhat have control of the calories. At least I know that my salad that I just made, that I used Bragg, they have a Italian seasoning, has zero fat in it. It's delicious, and it has like some apple cider vinegar in it or something like that. It might have a couple calories in it, but it has no fat in it. It doesn't have any oil in it, right? So when I make that at home, I know that I don't need to dump ranch dressing on there. But if I go to Bud's with my family, which is a place out in Dixon, when I order a salad there, I'm going to use the ranch dressing because it's delicious and it makes it easier for me to eat the salad while I'm waiting for my steak or something like that. But when you cook at home, you're really liberating yourself a lot and you're taking control. And I'm not too government crazy, or like I'm not too
conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I'm not too political and stuff like that. But the short term thing on some of this, or the bigger picture rather, is that just like there's big pharma, which is not necessarily great for this country in many ways, but is also really helpful because the medicine that they create, it saves a lot of people, but it also causes a lot of damage and causes a lot of our addictions and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And same thing with big food. We're addicted to food, and I don't want to have to suck off a mom's teat for the rest of my life. You know, I want to be able to control my own variables, my own way, the best that I can. And I know that when I go to the grocery store, I know I'm still buying into this whole giant ecosystem. I'm sorry I don't have my own fucking goats in my front lawn, you know? But that is, I think those moves towards that, having your own garden and stuff like that, hunting your own food, like, man, I think that stuff is great. I don't know if I'll ever like have enough interest in actually doing that. But my own answer to that, the way that I can feel like I fat-proof my home, the way I can kind of have a safety net around my house and the people that I love and care about, is to cook at home. Buy the food, buy the ingredients that I feel are the best. This is the best educated decision I can make. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy something that is going to fit my budget as well. Things that aren't in my budget, I can't think about them at the moment. I'm going to buy what I can buy from the stores that I can buy it from, and do things. And then you take those things home and teach your family how to cook. When you're cooking something on the stove and your 4-year-old is running around, making all kinds of noise, doing whatever, throwing their crayons around or playing with their toys, and they say, hey, you know, or they, you know, babble to you or whatever it is, you should try to start to explain to them, like, I'm cooking, you know, daddy's cooking some eggs. You know, you want a couple eggs? Let them try the eggs. Explain to them, teach them about food. One of the greatest things you can ever pass along to your children, I think, is some sort of fitness and food literacy. You hear people talk so much about financial literacy. Well, you can't even write the damn check if you're not healthy enough. So who the fuck cares about money if you're not healthy? And we know that we need to be strong physically, and we also know that we need to be strong mentally. And you don't have mental strength and great mental capacity without physically being strong and physically being healthy, and vice versa. So those two things need to connect together. And one of the best ways to do that is to do your absolute best, not to DoorDash stuff, not to give in to just these big giant food companies, and don't just roll through McDonald's, and don't just go to Applebee's. Like, all that stuff, that's great, and it could be part of a routine, and you could do it once a week or however. That could be fine. But I'm just saying, don't make it so routine. I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah, and I'm trying to nattify my house as well. Like, I'm even exploring like potentially making my own bread. Like, I heard it's pretty. Oh yeah, pretty
make
good.
Your own sourdough.
Yeah.
Ben Greenfield's big on that.
Yes, what is it called?
He also shoves things up his ass too, in his bathroom.
So you got to be careful. You don't want to meet your heroes, right? How about meal frequency? How many times a day do you think people should be eating?
I heard a recent stat, and the last time I heard the stat, it was like half the amount. So I was surprised. It was something like, I heard that people eat on average like 13 times a day.
Damn.
And that was how many times they consumed like calories. And the last time I heard it, I want to say it was like up to like 20.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, it just jumped a bunch from last time. I don't know how true any of this stuff is, but even if I'm thinking about myself,
sense.
Yeah, even if I'm thinking,
I was going to say it makes sense because, right, like a lot more people are working from home. And in my experience, like when we're here, it's really easy for me to focus on what we're doing and not think about food. But when I'm home, even if I eat the same big breakfast, just because I'm like, oh, what's in the pan? Like, oh, okay, maybe I'll have, an outright bar. Maybe I'll snack on something. And it's like, oh, that was another meal. I'm no longer the 2 meal a day guy. So that makes sense. If more people are at home, that they're just eating more.
I think we really inform our bodies, of what it is we're doing. You think about if you have a if you have a toddler in the house, they get used to certain patterns. If you have a dog in the house, the dog gets used to certain patterns. You know, sometimes just when you look at the dog a particular way, the dog thinks it's going outside and gets all excited, and you're like, fuck, I'm trying to get out of the house, right? You were trying to do something else, and now you're like, I can't let him down. I gotta like let him go outside or whatever. You take the extra time to go do that. But everyone is subject to these patterns. We have a lot of like pattern recognition, and you teach yourself over and over again how you're going to eat. So if you start out each day with like a muffin, which is basically starting out your day with cake, which is not a bad way to go. Actually, I should probably convert to that.
I mean, if you're going to have cake, you might as well just have donuts instead.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. Hot ones.
Let's get some donuts.
Some freshies.
We always get off track with food. This is the problem with food. It's delicious.
It's so good. Yeah.
Delicious and distracting. Makes things very difficult. But if you're used to starting your day off with something kind of sugary and fatty, a donut, by the way, as Dr. Lane Norton points out, has more calories from fat than it does sugar. So we're not always just talking about sugar. We're not always just trying to demonize sugar, although I think that's a good thing to work out of your diet as much as you can reasonably. A lot of the things that when we talk about carbs, a lot of times the stuff that we're talking about is like pizza, and pizza is not necessarily a carb. Yes, it has bread. Yes, it has carbs, but it also has a bunch of cheese on it, maybe a bunch of fatty meat on top of it as well. And it's just going to be something that you're going to overeat. Ain't nothing wrong with pizza either.
Love me some pizza. Pizza's so good.
But you inform yourself and you teach yourself what you're eating. So if your taste buds are exploding all the time with all these flavors, you get thrown off. And then someone's like, oh, I made a fresh halibut. And you're like, oh, you think it's disgusting. Like to you, you don't even think of food when someone says that. If you were to show from other cultures, if you were to show someone a picture, maybe you can bring up a couple pictures of the way that they serve fish sometimes in Japan and stuff like that. Sometimes the thing's like got everything on it still. It's got the eyes and it's the whole thing. And here in the US, you'd be like, oh, like for some people, it causes like a visceral response. They're like, that's gross. Or they can almost like smell the fish, before they even, there you go. There's a shot of it. A lot of people would be like, oh my God, it's disgusting. Other people would be so grateful that they have a big old fish in front of them. The point here is that be careful what you teach yourself, because these are patterns, and these patterns get ingrained over time and they become habits. So are you teaching yourself that after you have a meal, like think about it, you just ate a meal, that meal should have been satisfying, it should have been good enough, but then most of the time after that meal, you want to finish off the day with something sweet. So you start to kind of teach yourself that over time. You also teach yourself how many times a day you're going to eat. We're also too addicted to water, by the way. Everyone's always walking around. Just so people know, like walking around with water bottles, that's from the last maybe 10, 15 years. That's pretty new. People did not walk around with water, and they probably don't walk around with water in other countries. It's probably more of a United States thing. But
at least make sure it's a hydro flask, though.
Yeah, exactly. My daughter, she fills up her thing with water before she goes to school every day. Did you do that when you went to school? I don't know.
No.
No, I mean, you maybe sip the water fountain here and there.
Yeah, no, I never.
Yeah,
I never carried water.
And even water bottles, like water bottles are new. They're pretty new-ish. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no one's gonna buy bottled water.
Yeah, I don't even the gyms I went to when I was a kid, I don't think they had that. It's like they started to have like American bodybuilding stuff, like Rip Fuel and stuff like that, like maybe late 90s or something like that. But
I remember everything else, right? They always had soda. Snapple was huge. That was in like every freaking gym and
And there's vending machines, right? And the vending machines are by X company, Pepsi or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it was always like, if you had the $1 to put in the machine, you were not going to press the A1 to get the boring ass water. Like you were going to get the Gatorade or something else. Like it was strange that anybody would even purchase water.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't a thing. And now when I go to my daughter's volleyball tournaments, the only thing they have in the vending machines is water. Every row is just water. That's all the thing has is water.
Cost per ounce to sell is probably real. Like the margins are insane.
Yeah, they're like, we're not going to bother to sell anything else. They just sell a ton of water. So we're addicted to even water, and I don't want to sit here and like tell people that they're drinking too much water, because I think drinking water is a good practice. There's also a lot of people that are probably dehydrated, but you can also be dehydrated because you could be drinking too much water, because it can dilute you of a lot of essential vitamins and minerals that your body needs. So it's just some of this stuff's a weird rabbit hole, but what I'm trying to teach you and trying to talk to you about right now is that you teach yourself your own eating patterns. So if you have kids, if you're listening to this and you're 35 or 40, your life is over already. You're already screwed. Now, you could teach yourself some new habits, but it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of energy. But for the new people that are coming around, for your nephew or anytime you get opportunity to share information about nutrition, take it and do the best you can. Try not to scare people off. Try not to tell them that they're not allowed to eat carbs. Try just to encourage them to eat whole foods, to eat when they're hungry, to actually be hungry. So there's something that I refer to as fake hunger, which fake hunger would be you go to your fridge and you look in there. Every time you open the fridge, you're always expecting something new to be in there that you're going to like really love, like a German chocolate cake or something, but it just never happens. You open it and it's like the same bullshit's in there. But if you're not hungry for things that aren't like, then you're probably really not hungry. Your hunger's probably fake. If you look at the apple and you're like, I don't want that. If you look at the cottage cheese, you're like, if you look at the yogurt, any of these things, and you kind of scoff at it and you're like, I don't feel like that. Well, what do you feel like? I mean, you know what you feel like. You know that you feel like eating cookies, or you know that you feel like eating ice cream. Those would be things that you would easily get a second stomach for. And a lot of times we're not really hungry. We're just kind of bored.
Yeah. And if you are seeing the, like the yogurt and, it's just like, bleh, but you're probably like, man, I kind of always think that though. Like I'm never really interested in that food. Something I was explaining to somebody whose daughter, she's like, I try to get her to eat, but all she wants to eat is chips. I'm like, okay, well, think about this. I'm like, think about the best steak you've ever had, like a freaking steakhouse, like I forgot what it was, the Firehouse or what was it called? Campfire steak down in LA that we used to get.
Yep.
Oh my God. Okay. Out of 100, that's like a 25. A bag of Doritos is like 1,000. Okay. As far as like confusing your taste buds and igniting everything. Like, so when your daughter eats that and then you make dinner, why would she ever want to have something that's, under a 10? When she just had over 100. So something to keep in mind is like, okay, think about the first meal or the pre-meal. I think we had a discussion about this on the podcast. It's not necessarily the meal you're eating. It was the meal you had prior that can kind of mess up this meal. So yeah, if you aren't too interested in some of these natty foods, maybe getting rid of some of the unnatty foods might actually make these natty foods a lot more enticing.
Yeah, you have less choices, so then there's less harm that you can do. Maybe you still have stuff that's like, maybe you have some nut butters around the house. Maybe you have some dark chocolate around the house. Maybe you have some things that are still like, yeah, I could easily overeat the shit out of that.
Yeah.
But it's still better bet. It's still, like, better is better, and that's what I want to see people do. I want to see people be better than they were yesterday, better than they were last week. Think about how easy it is to be better than you were like 3 years ago. It might be difficult to be better than you were yesterday, because like, it's just going to be these small incremental tiny little things. which we're going to get to in a second, because those things are kind of annoying and they don't seem like they're enough, but they're pivotal. The thing of something like, how many times to eat, or how many times to eat is a question of, how do I control my hunger? How do you control your hunger? How do you control your cravings? Why do people stop their diet? They stop their diet because they're probably hungry, and they stop their diet because of cravings. Those are two things that are like distinctly different. Being hungry might be that you're just kind of like underfed. You might be pretty satisfied from the foods that you're eating, but you're just not eating quite enough. The things that can happen from not eating quite enough are very, very detrimental. Like they're disastrous. They're more disastrous than we can even really measure or see a lot of times. A lot of times when someone gets to be in a caloric deficit, if it's for a little while, or they're simply just not used to it, they're going to notice some fatigue. Their workouts aren't going to be good. For some people that we know, their workout is kind of everything. Mm-hmm. Their workout is like the most important part of the day. You know this with jiu-jitsu. There's some guys that they live for those hour or 2 hour sessions on the mats. Like that's like their day. They fucking love that. Well, if I give somebody, a jiu-jitsu guy, a diet, and they start performing bad, they're not gonna last very long doing the diet, because they're gonna be like, man, as soon as they start to have bad workouts, well, these workouts mean so much to me. I don't want to have shit workouts. Mm-hmm. And that's where you start to get in like a lot of conversation where you're like, okay, we got to talk about this a lot more. Okay. You need to not count your calories for a while. You need to eat every time you're hungry. Go full blast, go full bore with these whole foods. Do that for 2 or 3 weeks, and then let's kind of see where you're at. No one wants to do that because it kind of takes, too long. But again, how easy is it to be better than you were 3 years ago versus than you were yesterday? So if we're like, listen, I got to inform you of something. If you want to be good at jiu-jitsu, we have to talk about the next couple of years. If you want to look like anything, because you're starting at a gym for the first time, you're starting your fitness journey. Well, if you're starting your fitness journey, I got news for you. It's going to take you 2 or 3 or probably maybe about 5 years before other people start to recognize that you lift regularly. That's a long time. But so maybe the news is sad, but maybe the news is good. The good side is we don't have to really try to go fast, because we're going to be way better off 3 years from now, almost regardless of what we do. If we're just consistent and we just put in some work, even if the work is at a 6 out of 10 intensity, even if you go in there and just kind of bro out and you don't really push, you don't get grunty and you don't get all crazy, you're still going to make insane progress, especially if you never lifted before. So these are the things to kind of keep in mind. When you go on a diet, there really isn't a diet. It's a lifestyle forever, especially if you are fat. If you are fat, there's no way out. There's not an end to it, because once you lose the body fat, then you have to maintain that weight loss. And we know here in the United States, there's been study after study. There's been tons of research done showing how many people have lost 40 pounds, 50 pounds, even 70 pounds, only to gain it right back. So we don't really have a weight loss issue here in the United States. That's not necessarily even a lack of willpower, because they did do it. They showed that they could do it, but then it was hard to maintain because people have the wrong idea about nutrition and probably about fitness.
Pat Project family, how's it going? Now, we talk about meat a lot on this podcast, which is why we've partnered with Piedmontese and have for years now, because they have some of the best beef on the planet. All right, Piedmontese beef has cuts that are fattier in terms of their ribeyes, and they have also cuts that are leaner in terms of their flat irons, but you can get cuts for no matter what diet you're on. Andrew, how can they get their hands on it?
Yeah, head over to Piedmontese.com. That's PIEDMONTESE.com. And at checkout, enter promo code POWER for 25% off your entire order. And if your order is $150 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Yeah, and that is tough when you explain to somebody like, because, I want to do this 30-day challenge. I want to do this work thing, whatever it may be. But you're just like, no, this is just what you do now. It took me a long time to really, like, I was already doing it, but to understand what it even meant to say, like, this is a lifestyle. I thought it was just something you can kind of adopt for a little bit. As silly as that sounds, is now that I understand. But so you're right. It sucks because it's like, wait, I got to do this forever. Like,
well, do I look the same as when I competed in bodybuilding? Does Nsima look the same when he competed in bodybuilding? And do you look the same as when you did your photo shoot? Like, none of us are that lean. We're not going to stay that lean. Those are like more extreme examples, but you get the idea. Like, it doesn't matter how skilled you are at this. We're all skilled. We all understand what to do. But to try to hold on to that takes a lot more work. And it's not like we abandoned our diets. We actually just switched our diet to be a little looser because we made a compromise. And that's what people will have to figure out for themselves. They'll have to figure out, what do I want my lifestyle to look like? Like, am I going to be the person that carries around the Tupperware and carries around the gallon of water? Am I going to have Tupperware, at a wedding? Am I going to, only eat from or only drink from glass, things that have, things that are in glass rather than plastics? I'm like, you can take this as far as you want. It's kind of up to you. You're allowed to make that up yourself, and you're allowed to make room. What if you're 21 and you want to have drinks on the weekend and stuff? Do you have to completely stop that stuff? I don't think so. You might have to reevaluate how you go about doing that. And you might have to be thoughtful, which could be hard to do when you're super young. But you might have to think, why do I like to go drink with my friends? Well, I kind of like getting a buzz. And I like to get like a little bit drunk. But I don't love not being able to go to the gym the next morning. And I don't like this about it. I don't like that about it. When you start to kind of add that up, you're like, okay, well, maybe I can drink something that gets me to a buzz, but doesn't get me too far beyond that. There are ways to handle it. There's ways to do it.
Yeah, I actually did have a question about alcohol, but what I was getting at about like understanding that this is the long game is looking at it now, believe that it relieves a lot of pressure because it's no longer the sprint of the 30-day challenge. It's like, well, shit, in 30 days, as long as I don't gain weight, then we're doing good, and understanding that, like, yeah, in 5 years is when maybe somebody else will notice. So like you said, we don't have to sprint. But it was funny, it actually happened this morning. One of the younger guys at jiu-jitsu, he just got back from a bachelor party. It was like one of those like long, like week-long ones. I'm like, oof. So he told somebody else, he was just like, dude, if I might just tap and go throw up. And then so as we started like talking, and everybody had the same idea, which was like, man, it's not even worth it anymore. So I was going to ask you about alcohol, but since we're already in it, I believe that once you do start developing a lot of these habits, the alcohol stuff will kind of settle itself. And if that makes sense, then like you can kind of keep going on that unless you have other like tactics and stuff when it comes to alcohol, because that usually comes up, right? Somebody asks about diet, like, oh, but what about alcohol?
Yeah, usually a lot of good habits that you have over time, and you keep filling your plate up with that. A lot of times those things will dissipate. They might not completely disappear, but you'll get yourself to a point, and it may take a while, to where doing the practice of the thing feels so much better than not doing it. When you don't do it, sometimes at first when you don't do something that you want to do or that you're supposed to do, sometimes you feel bad and you feel like shame, and you're like, everyone knows I didn't show up, and like then you kind of just frustrated with yourself. But as time goes on, you don't really get that same way anymore, but you still are breaking yourself up out of a pattern that is really important. And you can't lie to yourself. The human body keeps score, it keeps track. And so I think one of the more important things here is to continually, like, let's not even talk a ton about the negative. Let's just try to focus in on what are the things that we can do positively, because the things that we're going to do positively are going to be the things that are going to move us forward. I shouldn't really have to give you a speech about alcohol and how it's not really helpful towards your goals. I think that most people probably, they should recognize that, and they should know that, especially if they've been listening to this podcast for a while. I also shouldn't have to give you a speech that if you want to be a world champion in anything, if you want to be a world champion in something like jiu-jitsu, maybe only eating pizza is not going to be a great way to get there, especially if you feel like you're not super talented and things like that. You may have to push into it with every single thing that you have. You mentioned something that's interesting, and I think here's what is one of the main things that really messes people up in life right now. I think that a lot of people, they aren't where they want to be. They're not who they want to be. They don't have the money that they want. They don't have the body that they want. They may not have the job or position or social status that they want. And with their current habits, they're just not going to get there. That's what people are. That, in my opinion, that's where a lot of anxiety and pressure comes from. And then for someone to stay on their diet, they're like, "Fuck that, man! I just want to do what I want to do. I just want to eat." But you also just told me the other day that you want to drop some weight. Your actions aren't lining up with that. So, are you going to have more? It takes a lot to have your food prepped and stuff like that, right? But are you going to have more pressure on you and more anxiety by following through on what you said you wanted to do and what you already told yourself, the goal that you wrote down, the thing that you put in your phone, the thing that you messaged to some of your friends? Are you going to have more anxiety by having follow through on those goals and the steps that surround that goal? Or are you going to have less anxiety by doing it or not doing it? If you don't do it, I think that you know that you didn't do it. And I think that you build anxiety up over that. And then it just makes it a lot harder to kind of get back on track again. And then you're always talking about, I'm going to start on Monday. You kind of always are in this loop of really struggling and having a hard time of building consistency. Consistency is going to be built through small incremental changes over time. And that sucks because those small things a lot of times they may not be that challenging. Let's say that someone's listening right now and they are 50 pounds overweight and they haven't really done a lot of manipulation with their diet. We've heard this many times. Somebody just says, "Hey, just, cut back on some sugars. How many sodas do you have a day? Oh, you end up eating a bowl of ice cream every night. Well, can we switch to like low fat ice cream or something?" Not that low fat is great, but at least it's going to reduce some calories. How about we switch to low fat ice cream? Can you do it 4 times a week instead of 7? Can we get some sort of negotiation going here? And, could you eat more protein throughout the day? Because I think that that'll help a lot. Maybe cut back on some soda. They do these things and boom, they're like, "Wow, I can't believe it. I lost, 25 or 30 pounds. We have heard that many, many, many times here on the podcast. Unfortunately, sometimes some of these things, if they don't have that result, then people stop. And maybe they lost 5 pounds in the first 2 weeks and then it just kind of subsided. And then they're like, "Oh, everyone probably forgot that I was on a diet," and they kind of go back to their own thing and they gain some of the weight back. But again, by not having follow through on some of that, it's not like you're going to have follow through on everything all the time, but by missing your follow through on that, I think you're just going to create like a weird relationship with yourself. You're going to prove to yourself time and time again that you're not able to follow through on these things. And like, that just sucks. We've all done it. Everyone does it. Everyone has stuff that they say they're going to do and they don't follow through on it. Like, it happens to everybody. But there are things that you can really control. You can control how many times you go to the gym in the week. You can start to gain control over your food. And I think we have a lot of people that they spend more time out of control than they are in control.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the most overlooked error that people are making when it comes to their diet? I always point to like, well, how many, what are you drinking? Are you drinking liquid calories? Maybe that's adding up. Like you just mentioned somebody like, oh, I'm just going to switch to, low fat ice cream, or I'm going to switch to Coke Zero instead of the regular. And it's like, oh, hey, I did this, with a buddy of mine, and now we both dropped 5 pounds without changing anything. But if somebody is kind of like they're having the teriyaki rice bowl that you were mentioning earlier, like, damn, I'm just not sure what's going on here. What do you think it is that people are just kind of neglecting or forgetting and not being able to reach their goals?
I think a lot of people that have tried dieting before, I think they are trying too hard. They try to restrict too much. There has to be some lines drawn in sand so that you know what you're doing and you know the intent. You know the intent of what you're doing. That's why I personally have always liked a lower carb diet. Even to this day, I eat more carbs now because I run, but I still have a lot of meals that don't really have carbs in it because it's like second nature to me. I'll just have a thing of meat and then I'm like, oh shit, I forgot I was supposed to run 12 miles tomorrow. I should probably have some carbs, or I may have had carbs early in the day and I'm just like, I'm not even gonna worry about it or think about it. But the biggest thing that I think really hampers people is they're not protein minded enough. I've said this a million times on the show. If the percentage of protein went up from the standard American diet, if it went from 12%, which I think it's at, and it went to 20%, people have different results, different ways for many different reasons, but nearly every single person, if the entire United States had to go on this protein leveraging diet and they had to increase the percentage of protein that they ate, they would all lose weight. So it's protein out the ass, and protein up the ass, protein every which way you can take it. And your diet and your exercise journey can be this easy. Break down muscle and eat muscle. Break down muscle, eat muscle. Break down, repeat that motherfucker a lot, times a lot, and you will make crazy gains, crazy progress over time. Now, we obviously have to eat something other than just muscle, but luckily for us, other than the fact that humans are able to like completely dismantle an animal, protein and fat always come together, except for in the case of like chicken breast, which again is us dismantling the chicken. If you were to eat the whole chicken, that would be protein and fat. Or if you just buy chicken with skin on it, that's protein and fat. Protein and fat is going to be, protein is very satiating, but it's not very satisfying. Satiating meaning that it's going to keep you full for a pretty long time. Fats slow down the absorption of nutrients, and it takes a longer period of time to digest things that have reasonable amounts of fat in them. So that protein and fat meal that you have, it should sit there for a while, and it should be something that you still feel sustained from. You're not supposed to feel full all the time. Just because you're not full doesn't mean you're hungry.
I got some space now. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in other countries, it's a pretty common practice to eat until they're no longer hungry, rather than what we do here in the U.S. is to eat until there's full, and then there's stuffed, and then there's, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Yeah. And then there's,
Oh my God. I still struggle with that. But luckily for me, I eat a lot healthier food. So even if I do that, I might be overeating, but I'm not over consuming the energy that I'm taking in. So the biggest thing that plagues people is just not consuming enough protein and not understanding protein leveraging and how powerful it could be. Because when you increase the amount of protein that you eat, over time, you will start to decrease the overall calories that you consume. If you were to try to teach somebody that this is the pattern I want you to try to fall into, I'm going to have you do this diet for the next month, and I'm going to pay you $100,000 for the month so you don't bitch at all. But here's what I'm going to actually teach you something, and I'm going to pay you. So I'm going to give you a steak, and every time I'm actually just going to feed you. I'm going to give you a steak at 8 a.m. I'm going to give you a steak at 1 p.m. and I'm going to give you a steak at 7 p.m. every day. Boom, protein and fat. Boom, protein and fat. Boom, protein and fat. There might be times over the course of a week, 2 weeks, where you push the steak away because you don't really want that. You're not ready for that. You don't feel like you need it. You've had enough protein, you've had enough fat, and over periods of time, you get like a taste bud fatigue towards that food. Now, if I slid some French fries over to you, you'd nail it, right? You'd be like, damn. And you might even eat steak too. You might be able to eat both very easily. Or if I said, hey, just eat the steak and you get your ice cream afterwards or whatever, right? But if we did this for a little while, what you could teach yourself is that the only thing that I'm going to eat after every fast that I do, every time there's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours in between the time I ate, the only thing that I'm allowed to eat is protein and fat. If you did that every single time, over time, you're going to teach yourself to really love those foods, and you're going to start to really look forward to those foods. Obviously, you can overdo it to the point where you're like, I don't want to see that ever again. That's not my main point here. My main point here is that if you are not hungry for that steak, if you just wait a little longer, you will be hungry for it again. Not only be hungry, but you'll be like, fuck, man, where's that steak? And someone's like, oh, yeah, you served it to somebody else. You're like, shit.
You gotta wait again.
Yeah, you got to wait again. But I think that something like the carnivore diet, which sounds like a wild thing, that's exactly what it's trying to inform you of. If we just have this one thing, which, by the way, the carnivore diet is not just steak. I think that people just think it's cow meat and it's steak and that's it. Any meat will work. But that's what it teaches you, is that if you're not hungry, then you don't eat. And the next time that you eat, you're going to eat steak. The next time you eat, you're going to eat some ground beef. The next time you eat, you're going to eat some bison. The next time you eat, you're going to have some elk and so on. And salmon. And yeah, there's a lot of different options when it comes to that. It's not an easy thing to teach yourself to eat that way, because we have so many different flavors going on. I've mentioned this many times on the show before. People end up with 7-Eleven gas station taste buds. They're so used to so many different flavors, hitting everything from so many different directions. If you think about what your average 8 or 9 year old kid may have in a day, especially on a weekend or a holiday or something like that, just everything they have. And I'm guilty of this too. I'm drinking this drink right here and it's got tons of flavor in it, this Fit Aid thing, Monsters and stuff, but at least I have an awareness of calories and what it is I'm consuming. And that gets really, really important, that you start to get in tune with the foods that you're eating. But does every single thing that you every single thing that you consume, does it have to be entertainment every time? Does it have to be this fucking party going on in your mouth every single time? Or can it be something just like more reasonable that's nutritious for you? Over time, what you'll find is that if you kind of just get rid of the word diet a bit and just think about it as nutrition, your nutrition needs to be nutritious. I made it. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to say that. Your nutrition needs to be nutritious. It's really important because if it checks all the boxes, if it fills in the amount of protein that you need, if it fills in the amount of fat that you need, the amount of vitamins and minerals that you need, if it checks in a lot of those boxes, you're going to feel fucking awesome. But a lot of times our micronutrients are low, but our macronutrients are through the roof, especially from carbs and fats. And so how do we kind of get this balance? If you eat more meat, you'll be right here. For people that don't eat meat, I don't have much to say because I don't know much about what people do that don't eat meat.
Yeah. Protein and fat. It's almost like nature kind of knew what it was doing when it gave us animals that happen to have protein and fat. You had used the word fasting, and I think we would need a whole nother discussion on fasting. So I don't even want to get to that. But if you have any closing words, you can say that and we can wrap things up.
I would say that just to mention something about fasting, I think it's important to have space between your eating, your meals, I think it's important that you're just very thoughtful about the food that you have, the food that you eat. And so we can utilize fasting and eating to our advantage. You don't have to think about like, oh, I ate, so I'm not fasted. You can think about your eating as being an advantage. Oh, I ate here, so this is actually going to pull a little bit from the calories tonight. I'm not going to be as hungry when I get home. You could think about it as an advantage, or you can even protein leverage. This is something I do pretty often. I'll eat something that's primarily just protein, maybe about 2 hours before I eat my main meal. That slows me down pretty dead in my tracks. Sometimes I'll eat something that I don't even really love. Like I'll eat like fish out of a fucking can because I don't care. I'm just like, I don't care. Sometimes I'll do that while we're here because we're podcasting a couple times and we're doing stuff in the gym. I'll just go in my office and eat some of that, and that sustains me. Then when I go home, I'm not so like ferociously hungry. Remember, fatigue makes cowards of us all. And if you're tired and fatigued and kind of beat up from your diet, you're going to continually make bad decisions. If you're going to bed hungry, it's going to interfere with your sleep. Your sleep is going to massively alter and change the way that you eat. So we can't forget about sleep. Get your phone. I try to encourage people to get their phone in their bedroom. I don't think anybody ever listens to me. But let's, see if you can put your phone on airplane mode or something and get it away from you. I don't think it's a good idea. I think this is a good rule of thumb, and everyone should be able to follow this one. Just don't lay down in your bed with your phone. Please don't do that. Even if you have to be in a chair that's next to your bed because you're finishing up something and you're checking on something, don't teach again, these are all things that you're teaching your body. You're teaching your body like, oh, I'm going to fuck around on my phone and have this light keeping me awake forever. Again, it's just another thing that's distracting you from, and the better you are with your sleep, when you get yourself to sleep on time, the easier it's going to be to follow that diet plan. Kind of in closing, I just want to make sure that I mention that people are taking otherwise really important real estate in their stomach up with foods that their body doesn't actually really need. So you're doing, a lot of times we end up doing this with desserts and snacks and chips and all these things. All living things are in search of protein, and you're not going to find your protein at the bottom of a bag of chips, as awesome as that would be. Most of these foods, again, this is big food. There's billions of dollars involved in this. They are making these things so flavorful that if you were to take a couple of bites of some Doritos and somebody gave you the best cooked steak in the world by the greatest chef of all time, that when you went to eat that, the flavor would be so diminished that you would not even barely recognize how flavorful that steak was because you just ate those Doritos. So all these foods, they really desensitize the shit out of our taste buds. And I think it would be a great idea for people to utilize the word fasting as a way to start to fast that stuff out of your house. Start to fast yourself away. Get distance from that stuff. Maybe that stuff, I don't know, maybe it's around on a holiday. Maybe it's Super Bowl Sunday. I'm going to have, French onion dip and potato chips. Sounds great. Go for it, But we shouldn't feel the need to have these things all the time. And keep in mind that you want to be protein forward. You want to make protein the priority. So if you can't remember anything else from today's show, make protein your priority. You should have 1 gram of protein approximately per pound of body weight and or per pound of the weight that you want to be. I've heard people kind of say that as well. I don't really believe that you actually need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, but since protein isn't necessarily an offender of the metabolism, it's not going to be something that's going to tilt you over, and especially in minor amounts, it's not going to be something that's going to make you gain body fat. But again, remember, protein is also often accompanied by fats. So you usually get the two together. So if you eat a lot more protein, you may be eating a lot more fat. So you might want to make sure that the protein sources that you have are things like Piedmontese steaks, which some people sometimes will look at some of the prices of some of these things and they'll go, man, this is like, X amount, more money. It's X amount more protein, and it might not fit your budget, and that's fine. But I think it's a great product. The steaks from Piedmontese, when you look at a ribeye from Piedmontese and a store-bought ribeye, and you compare how many grams of protein are in that thing compared to the grams of protein in brand X, a lot of times the Piedmontese steak has half the grams of fat, but because it's of similar size, it might have double the amount of protein. So that is completely nuts. Like, some people might have great results losing weight if they love steak, and they simply just switched. They made a small switch to Piedmontese. Another hack that just popped into my head for those of you that like eggs is to buy some egg whites. If you like making big omelets, you could still make a big omelet, but just see if you can cut back on the egg yolks. Are great, and they're great for you. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals and things in there that are awesome for you. But again, at some point, this is an energy balance situation. And Andrew throws down a ton of eggs every day. But Andrew also lifts, and he is meticulous with everything he does, fitness wise. Like, you're tuned up, you're lifting, and you're doing jujitsu. Not everybody is that dialed in with stuff like that. So it's one of the simplest things you can do is just to jack up the lean proteins that you eat, minimize your fats, make sure that your fats never get below, for most people, like 60, 70. It starts to get lower than that, and you're going to mess with your hormones in a negative way. So you definitely don't want to do that. Take us on out of here, Andrew.
Alrighty. So this is not mandatory homework. This is only for the savages that want to continue on with this conversation, because we were talking about fasting. Mark was talking about sleep. So you can just search on the YouTube channel. So our YouTube channel, you can just go to that little microscope thing and just search fasting. You're going to find a ton of content on fasting. If you type in sleep, you're going to find a shitload of content. And if you're on the mobile thing, just search Mark Bell fasting, search Mark Bell sleep, and you guys are going to find a bunch of stuff. Again, that's not mandatory homework. That's just for the people that are trying to get even better. So thank you guys for joining us for this edition of Saturday School. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comments. Drop some questions. If you have any follow-up questions, then we'll hit those up on a future episode. And make sure you guys like this episode and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed. Follow the podcast at MB Power Project all over the place. My Instagram is at I am Andrew Z. Mr. Mark Bale. Where you at?
Hopefully we got some people still listening. Hopefully you're hanging on because I got a little extra for you here.
A little Smelly's tip.
Yeah. I just, I want to kind of say, because we were talking about people that were lifting and that were pretty active and stuff like that. And so I may as well give some sort of carbohydrate recommendation. I just gave a fat recommendation. I already gave a protein recommendation. An athlete of any kind can kind of choose what they want to run off of, meaning they could consume more fat and keep the carbohydrates low. We don't really need carbohydrates. So your carbohydrates, the word need is an interesting one. Like some people may feel that they need them, and that's fine. But your carbohydrates could be anywhere from like you not going after or not even trying to eat any, all the way up to, I would say, about a gram per pound of body weight would definitely be very reasonable, and maybe even up to, depending on how you feel with it, maybe up to about 2 times your body weight. And that is going to slide and move around with the amount of fat that you eat. So if you start to eat a lot of fat, then you're going to want to drop your carbohydrates a bit. If you start to eat a lot of carbohydrates, you want to drop the fats a little bit. So you might have to kind of slide some of that shit around. But Andrew, you have any idea about how many carbs you eat? I know you used to track stuff. So what did it used to look like? You remember?
I used to think like, I ate so many carbs. But at the top, tippity top, I was still under 100 grams of carbs, and that's with a pretty low fat diet. Some days it would go over 100, but never over 150. Like, so I would actually still be very low.
So you might eat like a cup of rice, and then there might be some other carbs sneaking in from something else.
Yeah. And it usually came in the form of like a few slices of bread, which is still to this day is what it is.
Yeah. I think that's really reasonable, and you feel good.
I've never felt better. It's really awesome. Like, I've tried so many different diets. I've always had like a weird issue with eating since I was a kid, because I would have the Doritos and be like, no, Mom, I don't want to have dinner. And so it's taken my gut and all this stuff a long time to kind of repair itself. But having more natural foods has been a game changer for me. So just real quick, I will typically eat around 10 eggs for breakfast, 4 slices of toast, nothing throughout the day, and then a big old Piedmontese steak with rice for dinner. I will mix in a Fairlife protein, because to me it just tastes like a liquid.
Those are great.
Like almost like a melted ice cream is what it tastes like to me, except it's cold. That's what I'll have for dessert.
Fairlife, like protein thing, right?
Yes,
like
Fairlife protein.
They're ready to drink, 25 grams of protein or whatever.
Yeah. I get the ones from Costco, which have 30 grams of protein and only 150 calories. So,
awesome.
Again, who knows if that's how accurate that is, but it's more grams of protein, and it's kind of like a dessert. And so I've been doing that for, I lose track of time, but it's been at least 6 months. And there's been a good change in the physique. Again, I'm feeling good. I have energy throughout the day. Today I'm smoked. So I did have a monster, but I did 2 hours of jiu-jitsu in the morning, and I'm talking like 5:30 in the morning, hanging out with my son and doing stuff around the house. And I'm here podcasting now. And then after we drop off here, I'm going to go edit some other podcasts for tomorrow. And I feel fantastic. The stomach weird cramps throughout the day, and like random dude, I think I'm a little gassy right now. Like that's kind of gone away. And that's huge, because I've always had that, like forever. I've had that. And simply having eggs and steak has, kind of cured a lot of the issues I was having.
I think the three of us are the same. I think Nsima is similar. Like, we pretty much eat meat, eggs. You have some bread. I'll have some bread here and there. Do you have any dairy?
Yeah. I've actually recently started, because when you're tracking and you're following these higher carb diets, you are kind of terrified of introducing any kind of fat. Okay. So, non-necessary fat. So in this case,
which now you realize that you're not even on a high carb diet.
Right. But I started having heavy cream in my coffee because it's delicious. Because what was I doing before? I was having like a lot of artificial sweeteners. I was doing a lot of unnatty things, and I still will have like some sucralose and stuff because I just like stuff that tastes yummy. But I'm not like dumping it in there the way I used to, because I would have, I would maybe use some almond milk, and it just was nowhere near.
Well, almond milk has so much junk in it.
Right.
It's unbelievable. The list. You're thinking almond milk, that's good for you, right? That's how they promote it. It has tons of bullshit in there.
You ever look at Oatly?
Oh, all that stuff's fucking joke.
Oatly is ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying, man. Don't let these big food companies get you, man.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'll have heavy cream in my coffee now, and it's freaking delicious. And it's not. I used to think all dairy would destroy my stomach and make me gassy and make me all gross. Turns out it's probably everything else, including the dairy, but now I can have that and I'm fine. I switched over to like full fat yogurt, where before I was doing low fat yogurt or no fat yogurt, and thinking again, oh, it's the dairy. But when I have that, my stomach hurts. But it's like, oh, I'm getting full, so this is a good thing. I switched to full fat yogurt, which brand? Faye. The one with the big 5 on it, because it has the whole milk fat.
And is it a flavored one, or is it just plain?
I just go unflavored, and I'll use this is the whey protein, and I'll mix that in there with some fruit. And I don't do that often, but when I do, man, it is a party. And so that's that. And then I will have like cheese from time to time, but it's pretty rare that I eat outside of steak and eggs, so I don't really have cheese that often. But I will have some dairy here and there.
Dude, I love taking yogurt. It's like kind of depends on the brand of yogurt, but usually if it's a full fat plain yogurt, and put it on some potatoes. It's like sour cream.
Yeah.
Not as good as sour cream. Sour cream is
it's
like
pretty close, man.
Yeah, but it's kind of close.
It's very close. And like, what the fuck is sour cream?
Right.
I know people are like, oh, I gotta have sour cream and butter. It's like, well, sour cream's not even that good.
Right. Well, sour cream, is just one of those things that falls in a category. It's just all fat. So it's like, I don't really want to eat all. I'd rather, if I'm gonna make like a burrito at home, I'm gonna use Greek yogurt, because I'm gonna spike my everything I can with. I stick protein into everything. Yeah, I put it into everything.
Put in all those holes, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One more thing before we drop off, I should probably share a little bit about my exact eating, but I will say this: like this morning, this is pretty routine. I do this almost every day. I had a coffee that had some of our chocolate hydration in it, as well as a new creamer from Bubs, which is really good.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they have like a butter.
I haven't had it yet.
They have like a butter MCT thing, and that blended in my coffee. That is amazing. But then I also, because I made 2 cups of coffee,
How dare you?
made another shake that was an iced coffee with the steak shake and some of the chocolate hydration. But I had 3 eggs, so I do that a lot. I'll have like just like a small amount of food, 2-3 eggs for me just isn't much. Actually, sometimes it makes me like really hungry. So I had that with the protein shake. That's enough to kind of keep me going for a little while. And again, just because sometimes I forget, I just didn't eat that much carbs, and I do that pretty regularly. That's something I usually have in the morning. Sometimes it's without the eggs, sometimes it's with the eggs. Depends on the day. If I'm going to go for a run, I'll just not have the eggs. Later on in the day, usually we're here doing stuff. We're always here. So even on the weekend, I end up being here, or I'm out on a run or doing something. So my time is taken up usually through the morning. And I think that's a big thing, is to have hobbies, have things that you like to do, whether it's walking, running, jiu-jitsu, rock climbing, whatever. I think those things can be really, really important, because it can be a diversion from you thinking about food all day. When I get home, like for today, I made some crock pot meat. I put a roast in the crock pot yesterday when I got home from the gym, and so it should be perfect by the time I get home from the gym today. And all I did is I took a roast, I cut it out of the bag that it was in, I stuck it into the crock pot, I dumped some bone broth on there. You don't even have to do that, but that's what I did with this. You don't have to put anything in there. You could just put salt on your steak and you're good to go. And I dumped some fresh onions in there. So that'll like kind of marinate
Damn,
sitting there.
I am hungry.
It's going to be really, really good.
Shit,
but
I got
you can,
stuff to do.
But you can take any kind of meat and just throw it right in the crock pot. You can take a whole entire chicken and chuck it in there. My wife and I have done this before with pork or chicken, and just take your favorite like salsa and just fucking turn the thing upside down and dump it right in there. So I'll eat some of that when I go home, and then I'll just maybe 2 hours later I'll eat dinner with my wife and kids. If my kids show up at the table, they don't always do that, but my wife cooks up stuff that always has like a protein in it. So it'll have like protein. There might be like a vegetable in there. And then after that, I might have the same thing that you have, which is a fruit bowl with yogurt and fruit. Sometimes I'll add some honey to it. If I don't eat that, I might make another steak shake. If I don't have that, I might have a legendary tasty pastry. Mm-hmm. If I don't eat that, I might eat some dark chocolate. Usually I just am, because I've been doing this since the time I was like pretty young, I'm used to like having dessert. Mm-hmm. It's kind of ingrained into my head. And that's why I tell people, be careful with what you ingrain. I'm sure I could eliminate it, but I feel like I got a good control of it now, where it's better than ever. The other day, I actually walked down the ice cream aisle. I looked at all the ice cream and I left. I didn't even purchase any.
We're just doing research.
I was just like, this is pretty weak sauce, but this is where I'm at in my life. So
that's too bad.
I know. You can really change your habits. So hopefully you guys got something useful out of this. Hopefully we gave you enough information. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness never a strength. I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Catch you guys later.